Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Griever back here, your guys' host as always, bringing you guys the latest behind-the-bar reviews for Chapter 190 of Akatsuki no Yona, also known as Yona of the Dawn. Let's get underway with this chapter, and please forgive my haphazard appearance here, ladies and gentlemen, as you can note, and the appearance of the bar. As you know, this chapter review is a couple days late. That's because I've been really adamant on trying to get this basement project while we're all under lockdown in this world level crisis. I've just been trying to get some work done down here, and unfortunately that's making the bar a little bit of a mess. So forgive the appearance, forgive all that, and we'll get underway with this review because there was a reason I waited. The chapter dropped, and I was also informed in my YouTube comment section, I forget by who, but thank you very much if you're watching this review as well. But the chapter dropped, and I read it, and I was in no rush to come down here and do a review. And the reason being is because though I am interested, I feel like I can understand the feelings of those of us who read One Piece, and those of us who cared less than two shits about the flashback that just happened with Kazuki Oden in One Piece. We had those chapters for months. We had 12, 15 chapters of a flashback. And though it's great for the lore and the history and the things that we are going to find out, I'm not necessarily invested right yet. Because this chapter, for the first half, just continues on the conversation with the four dragons, and we get the with soo-won, and yes, okay, all this is Yona finding out and us finding out, but we already knew this at the end of the last chapter. So the first half of the chapter is simply everybody's reactions and questions, with no questions that we as the fan base would have, just questions in general. Things that we already could have answered for ourselves. Things already assumed, semi-confirmed, but at the end of the day, the first half of the chapter simply says soo-won is the descendant of the Dragon King, the Crimson Dragon King. Okay, we knew that at the end of the last chapter. We assumed it for the longest time, and now we know for sure. But we already knew it at the end of the last chapter. So this first half, it's not a bad chapter, don't get me wrong. It's just that there wasn't anything mind-blowing to come down here and review about, because it's just confirming, it's reaffirming the information we got at the end of 189. We also get the fact that the Crimson Dragon King also had 5 children. Okay, I don't know if that'll ever be relevant. Do those bloodlines still exist? Maybe the Fire Tribe themselves did come down from that one of those 5 children's line a long time ago, and that's why the Fire Tribe was like that. So don't get me wrong, there's information here, but that's what happens. First half of the chapter, first 10, 15 pages, that's what happens. So at the cornerstone of the other half of the chapter, we actually get a flashback to a very young soo-won's mother. And we get and I think her name is Yeon-hee, if I'm remembering correctly. And then we get Yuhan himself, of course, the general, the mad titan who was going to take over, who ran through bloodlust and battlefields and stuff, the brother of King Il, of course, the uncle, Soo-won's father. They're both introduced this chapter. I get a very Hawk feeling from Yuhan. I get a very Hawk feeling, and I see it being interesting and such, and I'm going to be invested in the next chapter when we really start the flashback, because I feel like we'll get some more insight, more information. But this chapter was necessary, but simply an introduction chapter. Not a lot happens. It's simply, let's jump back 30 years or however long it was. I forget the timestamp, if there was one. And here is after the funeral of Soo-won's grandfather, Yeon-hee's mother, or Yeon-hee's father, who had the Crimson Dragon illness, the thing that killed apparently King Hiryu, and that's been killing this bloodline for generations. They all know who they are. They're the Crimson Dragon King's bloodline, and they need to be, careful and they need to keep themselves from outside people, but they must continue the bloodline. For what purpose, I don't fully understand. It's not really stated here. Like, I guess they believe that one day their bloodline will be necessary to reincarnate or something. Clearly that's not the case, whereas Yona is not a direct descendant. This is confirmed that it was not Yuhan who had the Dragon King's illness, but the mother, and the mother did come from outside of royalty. So it really has no blood ties to Yona. That being said, it's simply an introduction area where we see her. She's a rather poor girl. She's not royalty. They try to seclude themselves in similar sense to some of the dragon villages that we came to know in the first arc of this series. Some of them friendly, some of them not, but seclusion was the key factor here for the Dragon King descendants as well. And though it seemed they had a host for a funeral, it seems like there's still a secluded village in some regard. Whether a big village or not, it seems that that's the way. Nonetheless, the daughter, of course, Yon, he goes out to the village to, simply purchase some food, but come back. She's not supposed to leave for very much. She's not supposed to tell people who she is, where she's from, etc. A falcon or a hawk, ironically, a hawk, attacks Yonhee as she goes down because she's carrying raw boar meat, and I guess the hawk, said falcon is hungry, right? And that's when she meets Yuhan, who, as I said, reminds me a little bit of Hawk with his attitude and such. This exchange is fine. I knew once we jumped into this, I knew we'd be getting this flashback sort of mini arc. It's probably going to go on for 3 or 4 chapters. So if you guys are not interested in this, I can understand. There's a lot of people who dropped off One Piece until we jump back to the Straw Hats, as I explained at the beginning of this review, is that there will be people who will not want this. They're more curious about Hawk and Yona and the mysterious swordsman and the dragons and what's going to happen. Where's the fighting? Where's the climax? Where's the build up to something big? The flashback right now is, I'm not going to say it's poorly timed though, because in all honesty, this has been a rather odd arc. It's been moving at a weird pace. The characters aren't really being themselves. I feel like this is a necessary thing, and this is probably a great thing, because I feel like the author or authors need to step back for a moment. The mangakas need to step back and reconsider their direction with Yona's character especially. So if having a few chapters of a flashback arc with characters that we literally know very little about, we only know the stories, but of course stories are hearsay. Seeing them in their teenage or their young 20s, that kind of idea, this might give them pause and chance to reconsider Yona's stance and Yona's attitude towards everything here. Because for me, I still am not 100% behind it. I have issues with Yona's character at this junction. And none of her reasoning, none of her inner monologuing has explained it away properly to me. I've tried to wrap my head around it, and all I can think is chapter 1 Yona would have behaved this way, not chapter 190 Yona. So, that being the case, I think this is a great idea for them to jump away. I suppose I should finish up with the chapter. I'm sorry this is so haphazard, ladies and gentlemen, but honestly, what's to talk about? Soo-won's mother and Soo-won's father meet. And here's their dynamic. Next chapter, 191, we will see the development of the romance. There's not really a whole lot to talk about. The Hawk eats the boar's meat. He eats the boar's meat. He's an idiot like Hawk and decides he can eat uncooked meat and such. Like, we're getting the comedy element of that. She can't say where she's from. She always wanted to see the city. A very Aladdin-esque person here, wanting to always think that the palace and the city is so grand and such, but she's not allowed to visit. And now this dashing young rogue comes out of nowhere. The maverick of the royal family comes out of nowhere and says, "Oh, hop on your horse. Let's go. I'm just going to take in a stray girl from the fields, So, very classic, very traditional, not unexpected, and that's basically the chapter. So I'm very, like, usually the Yona chapters, I have to really go in depth because there's a lot to discuss. We do see Zeno in the background. That's a key thing. Zeno is watching over her this whole time. Clearly was probably there for the funeral of her father and now is watching over her. We see a young child and he's standing there and she can hear the ching ching of his, of course, his emblem in his hair and such. But suffice it to say, this entire thing is just, it's a setup chapter. It's not a bad chapter. It's actually quite a good chapter. But there wasn't really a whole lot to talk about or review. At least I feel. And as I said, I think this is great. I know a lot of people will drop off because some people just aren't interested. As long as this brings up a good deal of lore, a good deal of answers to long-standing questions we of the fan base has had, then this flashback will be great. In the same way that the Kazuki Ode one from One Piece was, though a lot of people dropped it because they were bored. They wanted to be with the Straw Hats. I understand that feeling. Right now I'm kind of in that camp, where I'm just kind of like, no, don't really care. Let's jump back to Hawk. This chapter didn't give me any new information. I want to know what Hawk's up to. I want to see Hawk, But let's pace ourselves. Let's be patient. So I don't know if I'm alone in feeling this way, ladies and gentlemen. But let me know your thoughts down in the comment section down below. I could be totally left field with this. I could be unfocused. I could not be in my right mindset when I read this chapter. Maybe I should reread it a third time or fourth time and really, or maybe I should reread the last 4 or 5 chapters and catch up to 190 and see where the flow of this story is going. But either way, I still think it was a positive chapter because by jumping away from Yona, it'll give the mangakas time to be able to reevaluate their direction they're taking her, and I think that's the best thing for everybody. So let me know your guys' thoughts down in the comment section down below. I'm always really psyched to always respond to the big long paragraphs and the theories and such. Like, comment, and subscribe as always. It's always very much appreciated. This has been Griever with your Yona of the Dawn Behind the Bar review, chapter 190. I'm sorry it's so short. I'm just a little overwhelmed here with everything else going on, hence why the review is late. But I hope Chapter 191 is something that I can really dig my teeth into, and of course I will be here for that, hopefully this time on time. So thanks guys for watching so much. We'll see you next time.